Why MVVM? That was the thumbnail. That's why you clicked it. And I'm going to answer that today because so many of you have asked in the comments, why do I need to learn MVVM? What is it about? Why can't I just start writing code and be super productive? Why do I need to learn an entire architecture pattern to just start developing apps? Well, you don't have to if you don't want to, but you totally should. In today's video, I'm going to break down everything that you need to know about MVVM, what it looks like without MVVM, and what it looks like with MVVM to start building applications. So tune in. Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm James Montemagno and I'm back with another video today talking about MVVM. Yes, model, view, model, MVVM. It's sort of like MVC, but with more V's and more M's and actually one less C. So it's similar and not. You have the model, view, but you have a view model instead of a controller. Now, the whole idea here is it's an architecture pattern, right? Just like MVC is an architecture pattern, just like MVU, model view update is an architecture pattern. They're a way of structuring your code, and then frameworks come along to sort of spice it up, add some additional goodness for that stuff there. So like a controller in ASP.NET Core adds a lot of routing and a bunch of other stuff in there. The MVU, the update part of like a Flutter or a Comet application, sort of does automatic updating in sort of a C# or Dart style. MVVM came about in the world of XAML. So an XML-based markup language, which you use today to build things like .NET MAUI applications, Xamarin Forms applications, UNO applications, Avalonia applications, WinUI 3 applications, UWP applications, what am I missing? WPF applications, all the different types of applications for iOS, Android, Mac, Windows, all the good things as well. So it is a way of saying, hey, my user interface is going to be written in this XML-based markup. And what if I needed to test that code? Or what if I needed to simply abstract that code into a way that's not tightly coupled to my user interface? Because you can totally tightly couple it to your UI. We'll take a look at it today. But what if you do want to unit test that? Or what if you want to have some automatic updating happen as well? So the view model in MVVM sort of brings in that loosely coupling. View models should have basically know nothing about your user interface is the whole concept. And then in MVVM framework, which are all those things I listed, including .NET MAUI and Avalonia and UNO and all those things, bring in a data binding framework and structure to the application that enables sort of magic, if you will. So when your users type in a text field, it automatically will update the code behind. And when you update the code behind, it automatically updates the UI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down what it looks like to build an application, very simple, like a first name, last name app with no MVVM. Like, hey, I'm just slanging code over here. It's going to be great. And then we'll go ahead and use MVVM structure to actually take that code and put it into a more uniformed way of doing it that's super testable. So let's go ahead and check it out. All right, I created a very simple, this is just a .NET MAUI application. Again, it could be any application. App over here that has 2 entries, a label, and a button. Now with XAML, of course, the names and the properties and the things are gonna look the same, but most of the data binding, the logic, the principle are all very, very similar. Some syntax, of course, can be slightly different, but I'm here in a .NET MAUI application and the base here is gonna look pretty similar. So I have 2 entries, a label and a button. It says click me. If I open up the app, sure enough, I have a first name, last name, and a button that says click me. I can type in James, I can type in Montemagno, and nothing happens. Now, the concept here is that I would like to update this label specifically with whatever's in that label thing for first name and last names. I could concatenate those 2 things together. So let's first take a look at this. In the code behind here, the main page XAML CS, I don't have access to anything. If I just type in label, I have a generic label. I don't have access to this label because it hasn't generated a backing field. Like the XAML is just sort of rendered, and unless I tell the XAML that I would like to expose it via a public property or a internal property here to the main page, it's not going to do so, because why generate extra code if you don't need it? But I'm definitely going to need to update that label. So let's do something called x:\name. So I'm going to give it a name, sort of like exposing a property. Like if I had a property of label and in the code behind, I would create that as well, right? So I would do that here, and I'll say label full name. Now I know if I'm going to concatenate my label with the two fields from entry, I'm going to need to do that. So let's go ahead and do an name for both of those. I'll do entry first here, and then I will do entry last. There we go, entry last. Cool. So now if we were clever about this, what I could do is I could say void update UI, or update label, I guess. We'll just do that. And here what I'll do is I will say label full name dot. And here you can say I have access to all sorts of things. So I have opacity, text color, max lines, I have events, all sorts of things in here, but we just want the text property. So let's go ahead and do that here. And I'm going to say equals, and let's do some string concatenation of entry first dot text, do a space, and I'll do entry last dot text as well. Cool. So that's it. So I just have a little bit of code here. It's going to be updating every time. Now there's two ways of introducing in events. And this is where things get a little bit tricky because I now have these, main just references to these three different fields, but how do I create events on them? Well, there's two ways of doing it. If I wanted to, I could say entry first dot, and then here I could look at all of the different properties, and we can see I have size change, text change, completed. Over here, I'm going to say text change, and I could say plus equals, add an event here, and then I'm going to have this full event. So I can't just bind it automatically to this update label. I'm going to go ahead and put this here. Now it gets a little tricky because am I registering in the right place? When does it get unregistered? Is it going to be garbage collected here and there? So maybe I put the plus equals inside of a constructor, and then the deconstructor, I unregister it, or do I do that in on a pairing or on a pairing? It's a little bit funky. So what you can do is instead of manually registering it, you can come in and actually come into the entry, and you could say text changed, and I could do entry first text change. So I could just simply bind it, not bind it up, but set it here to that. Then what I could do is on the entry here, I could say text changed, and then I could create a new event because, I probably don't want them to be exactly the same. And that will create another field for me automatically inside of Visual Studio. So then what I would do is I'd say update label, and then I would also do update label here. And you're probably saying, well, James, now it kind of looks like you kind of have some repetitious code over here. But in general, I probably want different events maybe here, just so we kind of see it here. And this looks fine, right? This isn't a lot of code. But how do I test these things? How do I make sure I do this stuff? What happens when I need to pass this data around? It gets a little tricky. Because for example, if I came back to this button and I wanted to say, clicked, for example, and add a new event handler, that would look good. And then I could say, console.writeLine, and then I could say label full name dot text, for example, and just output that every time I click it. Cool. So I got a click event. But if I needed access to that button, then I got to do the same thing, right? I got to come in and I got to, enable it, disable it. I could come in and say x : name dot button test here. And then what I could do here is I could say, button test dot is enabled equals false. And then I could come in and say button test dot is enabled equals true. And now we're sort of, getting really deep references into the UI. Okay, so now I can actually run this application again. So let's do that. Let me shrink it over for my widescreen monitor. And sure enough, if I say James, I say Monty Magno, and then of course I can click, and you can see it kind of flashed there because it disables it and re-enables it automatically. But if we look back at the source code, how am I supposed to test this stuff, right? How am I supposed to come in and test that when this thing changes, this gets called, that this is actually set correct? Because I'm not setting it to a backing field. There's nothing to test here. How do I make sure this enables and disables automatically, that these things are being set? Well, you kind of can't, right? And that's kind of the bummer part of it. So let's add some MVVM goodness to it. The first thing that I'm going to do is come in and manage NuGet packages. And I'm going to install the community toolkit.mvvm version 8.0 preview. And I've done a whole video on this. And this is sort of the new modern way of doing MVVM that really simplifies development. This adds all sorts of good stuff in here. So we're going to add that NuGet package, which is great. And again, it's not required. You could do a lot of manual stuff, but we're not going to do that because, you know, why bother with manual stuff when you can do all this stuff for free, basically. But what I can do here is I can say add, and now I can do two things. I could add a brand new project, and my view models could live in that entire separate project. They don't have to live in this project, right? They could live somewhere completely else. Or I can just come in and add a new class. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to say that this new class is my main view model. Cool. Now my main view model over here, we're just going to go ahead and add a new namespace. We're going to say public partial class. I'm going to make this an observable object, which comes from that MVVM toolkit. So let's go ahead and add that on there. Perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and clean up some of these namespaces. Boom. All right, cool. Now we're looking pretty good. Okay, so what I'm able to do now at this point is actually start to implement this logic that was here, but I'm going to do it in a way that's like more testable, as well as add in some MVVM data binding magic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say string first name, string last name, and then I'm going to do a Boolean that is busy, because if I looked over here at this is enabled, we would want that to be set to false and then to true and do that console write line. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to do a public string of full name here. All right. Now this full name is going to concatenate the first name and last name, but the first thing we need to do is make these properties observable. So I'm going to say observable property. That comes from the MVVM toolkit. And I'm going to do that for all three of them here. So observable property for first name, last name, and is busy. Now that is a source generator, which is going to automatically come in and generate a bunch of properties for me. So here's on observable property, my main view model. And what we can see is that this has written a bunch of super optimized, highly optimized code here for first name, for last name, and it handles all of the changing and mechanisms to make the data binding work, which is really cool. So we're gonna do that. Now we don't need to make full name observable, because what we're gonna do is come in and say, hey, when we do this, just go ahead and set it to first name and space last name. There we go. Now that looks pretty good. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna tell the MVVM framework that, hey, whenever first name or last name changes, raise a notification for full name. So I can say raise, or what is it called? It's called notify property changed for. And here I can say name of full name. There we go. There we go. Perfect. Nice. All right. Now at this point, what I'm able to do is I'm able to come back into my main page XAML and just CS and delete all this stuff. I don't want to do any of this stuff, okay? Boom, get rid of that. And now inside of my main page, the idea is that I don't need to hard code in any of these pages, any of these name properties, any of this stuff. So I'm just gonna get rid of all of this stuff here, okay? So delete, delete, delete. Makes my XAML a lot smaller too. Again, I'm decoupling that UI from my code behind. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to say text. I'm going to say binding to first name over here. So this is a string basically that comes in and it says, hey, this is referencing a property name inside of my view model. And that's going to be the first name. And you can note that I'm using capital first name, because if we remember that source generator generated public string first name over there for me. And then what I can do is I can come in and say last name. Perfect. Same thing here. I can come in for the label and I will say full name. Now I'm not getting an IntelliSense in here because at this point I don't have any of my binding context or anything like that set up. So I could go ahead and do that here. So I can say X:, or XMLNS, view model. I'll say view model, or I guess it's just going to be my main, or what is it, MAUI app 4. And then I could say x:\data type. This is a .NET MAUI thing, and I'll say view model is my main view model. And then that will sort of link these two things together to get compiled bindings. We see those little dots go away. Now at this point for the button, I can also do this. I can say is enabled, and I can do a binding over to the is busy. Well, that's kind of cool, right? So I have that all rigged up and I'm good to go. So that will automatically enable and disable the button if I don't have to set any properties or do anything. And that means I can set it from all sorts of different methods and all those different things from my code behind, completely there. And the UI is just going to be reactive. All right. All right. So we're getting closer. The last thing we need to do is implement that button click. Okay. Now, when we do this, this is going to be something called a command. And a command, for all intents over here, is going to tell the button what method to call that's in the view model. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in something we'll call like tap command. All right, that'll be good. That's what we're going to call it. If I go into my view model over here, I'm going to go ahead and simply put in a void over here, okay? And I'm going to say tap. All right. And then now in this method, I'm going to do is busy equals true. All right. And then I'm going to do is busy equals false. And then I'm going to do something called console.writeLine. And I'll do, you know, full name. I'll just output the full name here, just like we did before. Now in this instance, you're probably saying, well, James, you're setting is busy to true and then is busy over here to false. So that's actually not going to work because by default is busy's going to be false, right, and true. So what we're going to want to do in our view model is do something I like to do is create a public, bool is not busy over here and do the opposite of is busy. So that's something you can do there too. So now in our XAML, instead of doing is busy, we'll do is not busy. All right, there we go. Perfect. Now the last part here is exposing that tap, turning it into a command. And luckily, the MVVM toolkit also does that. So here's the relay command. I'm going to bring in the MVVM toolkit. And what that will do is it'll automatically take the name and generate the I command or the implementation for you automatically and append command at the end. So if I go back over into my source generators and I look at the relay command generator, we'll see tap. And right here, we see the tap command. That's cool. All right, now what we're going to do is link these two things together, and I'm just going to kind of do it in a way I wouldn't do. I'd probably do some dependency injection, automatic fun stuff happening here. But I'm going to say binding context, which is the way of binding it up. And I'm going to set it equal to a new main view model. All right. All right, now before I boot this up, I need to do one more thing, which is I also need to say, hey, whenever I set is busy, I also need to set is not busy. There we go. So now when I boot this up, and we just have this nice MVVM sort of architecture here, I've segmented out this code. Tap is by itself. It's not worrying about the UI at all. And sure enough, now when I come into my app, I can say James Monty Magno, and I can tap away. And you can see it still click, enable, and disable automatically. Now, this is really, really cool because if you notice inside of my XAML, I have no references to the entry. I have no references to the text changed event or anything like that. Sure enough, the entry automatically just figures out what event to use. I don't have to tell it to call some other method or do anything like that. By principle of me setting right here the first name and last name properties, it's going to automatically raise that notification. Same thing here. Whenever I hit the tap command, it's going to automatically change that over. So now my application works super smooth, automatically responsive when I enter anything, and it's totally good to go. I can take this view model, put it into a completely separate project like I mentioned earlier, use my favorite unit testing framework like NUnit or XUnit or MS Test, and it's complete. It doesn't know about the UI. None of this knows about the UI. All this generated code is simply that, generated code. You don't have to worry about anything. Doesn't care about the UI. It's just giving notifications to .NET MAUI in this case that something has changed or something has been entered. You get that beautiful two-way data binding. And to be honest, that is really just the beginning of how MVVM and XAML UI and even C# UI all go together to give you that nice update mechanism back and forth. I hope that this was like a pretty nice overview, insightful look at why MVVM it's kind of almost necessary in some way when you're doing this type of application development, but how it adds a bunch of other perks onto it as well, like not having to put any code in your code behind that's not testable, or having nice automatic updates in there. And there's a lot more in XAML. You can do string formatting in XAML. You can reference other elements inside of XAML with data binding. You can additionally do things like value converters. So in this example, I was doing is busy, is not busy. You could have a value converter. I don't know why I use quotes again, but it's literally called a value converter, which takes one value and converts it to another value. You can deep link basically into other classes and properties. So if you had a person, you could do person.firstname, person.lastname, and all of that works together. You saw me use XDataType, which is the compiled binding. So that's kind of an extra tip and trick if you're using Xamarin Forms or .NET MAUI, where you get that IntelliSense, which is really cool. And of course, you do get all that IntelliSense inside of your IDE compared to have something completely separate in your code behind. That's me. That's MVVM, that's XAML, that's data binding. If you like this or if you have more questions into that world, I will link to documentation below into a deep dive into MVVM and XAML. I also have a whole video, MVVM 101, where I go through all that stuff. And I have a .NET MAUI workshop here as well. It's 4 hours long, takes you from start to finish. And of course, I have that video on the MVVM Toolkit too. If you enjoyed this video and you want more sort of explainer videos, let me know. I'll do them. Put it down in the comments below. Let me know what you think. But that's going to do it for this video. So until next time, I'm James Montemagno. Thanks for watching. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, cheers. Bye-bye.